One Piece Films, a fantastic opportunity to showcase the world created by Akira Oda on the big screen. Throughout the lifetime of the series, no less than 13 films have been produced featuring the Straw Hats in one adventure or another, but let's be honest, some were much better than others. So today, we are going to relentlessly shame the works that are a stain on the world of One Piece. Because you know what? One Piece is better than this, and the very existence of a lot of these works is simply disappointing. So with that out of the way, let's begin. Welcome to the top 5 worst One Piece films. Number 5. Episode of Alabasta. Alright, starting off the list, we may have a slightly controversial choice. Episode of Alabasta is essentially a remake of the Alabasta arc abridged into 90 minutes. So, it's one of the best arcs in the series, remastered with beautiful animation, so what's the issue? Well, the problem is that Episode of Alabasta does not stand on its own as a feature. If you are not extraordinarily familiar with the events of the Alabasta arc, you have no chance of keeping up with this film. It moves incredibly fast and unforgivingly, often having to forsake very key moments from the actual arc just to keep pace. And I think it's very problematic when you need to know the exact story of a film in advance to properly enjoy it. It almost makes watching the film a completely redundant experience. The changes that were made are mainly trivial, but they do serve to freshen up the experience somewhat. But really, if you've seen or read the Alabasta arc already, I can't give you a good reason to go and watch this feature. It's a good movie for looking at a few cool key moments, like Zoro vs Mr. One or Luffy beating Sir Crocodile. But as a whole experience, I really wouldn't sit down to watch this movie in its entirety. So that's a bit of an issue, and unfortunately, that's why Episode of Alabasta finds its way onto this list. Number 4. The Giant Mechanical Soldier of Karakuri Castle. This movie is a joke. Like a literal joke. It's essentially a parody of the One Piece films up until this point. It's very self-aware, attempting to subvert expectations, but in reality, it plays to the exact same formula that just about every other feature has followed to this point. The main villain, Ratchet, is intentionally unthreatening at every stage of the film, which undermines any sense of potential drama that could have possibly been built. And that's not necessarily an issue. Parodies can be great fun. The problem is, this film doesn't push that concept quite far enough, and it takes itself just seriously enough to be a bit awkward. In fact, the first time I saw the film, I didn't realise that it was essentially poking fun at itself, and I pretty much just had a rather unsatisfying experience and promptly forgot that it ever existed. But it is at least somewhat enjoyable if you look at it through the eyes of being a work of parody, and really, that's all that saves it from being further on this list. Number 3. One Piece the Movie. Coming in at number 3, we have the original One Piece movie feature. Now, it might be a bit unfair to be ranking this film alongside every other, considering it came out in the year 2000, but I'm afraid that time has not been kind to One Piece the movie. I mean, it does have a somewhat charming animation style, but going all the way back to a mere 4 straw hats in East Blue with an incredibly pitiful main antagonist is a big ask in this day and age. The setting is fairly boring, none of the characters particularly shine, and the fights are just kind of meh. Honestly, it's just an instantly forgettable experience, which I feel bad saying because it was their first feature, and they were really just trying to find their footing. I mean, little did we know that it would take, almost a decade and 9 movies later to find said footing, but hey, I'm sure they were doing their best with what they had at the time, which is a lot more than I can say for 2 particular movies that would come after it. Number 2. Chapas Kingdom on the Island of Strange Animals. This movie is a bizarre mixture of weird and boring all smushed into a 45-minute experience. The premise is alright, I suppose, but the execution is pretty damn poor, and feels very out of place in the One Piece world. I think it especially suffers in retrospect because in recent history the Zou arc introduced us to a very similar concept, that being an island full of animals, but it was just done infinitely better. The Straw Hats themselves are used in quite a boring way, as everyone except Chopper just kind of stays in a clump the entire time. As a result, it feels like most of them really may as well not even be there, because they don't really have anything to contribute until right at the end. And as for the main antagonist, well, he's probably the worst villain who has ever been seen in all of media. Anime, movies, games, promotional material, he's just garbage. The one saving grace this film does have is that Sanji and Zoro get some pretty nicely animated fights, but by the time they come around, it's far too late to save this feature. Number 1. The Cursed Holy Sword. Honestly, this was a pretty tough choice. The Cursed Holy Sword is very much on par with Chapas Kingdom, except that it feels even more pointless if that's even possible. The whole film takes place on a single island on a couple of continuously reused boring set pieces, and features Zoro doing something that, well, Zoro would never ever do for the sake of artificial drama. He abandons his dream of becoming the world's greatest swordsman and leaves the crew for a contrived reason to serve a poorly written character named Saga. The other major issue with this film is that magic is clearly present and used. Now, One Piece is very much a world of science. It works within the rules it sets for itself, but this film features a literal magic sword that controls people. It's not One Piece at all, and the worst part is, this film has no real villain. The sword itself is the thing responsible for all of the bad stuff that happens, and when your villain is an immobile, stagnant object, it's easy to see how an immobile and stagnant story can develop around it. And it's such a shame because a film focusing on Zoro could be amazing, but instead it was used to become one of the worst pieces of animated films of all time. And that pretty much does it for the top 5 worst One Piece movies. If you enjoyed this video, then feel free to like, favorite, or subscribe, and please do comment with your personal top 5 worst One Piece films. This has been the Grand Line Review, and I'll see you next time.